The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, I guess it's Saturday afternoon. Thank you all for joining me. Today we're going to take on one topic. There's a lot to say about it, I think. We'll see how far we get, and that is the topic of intersectionality. I did a show on this topic I think it was like June of 2017, but I think it was only audio. I don't think we did it on a video, and I couldn't find it on YouTube, so I figured it's time to do another one. And somebody did ask a question as part of the survey of my listeners, and in terms of topics that they wanted me to cover. This kind of got the third highest number of votes. I figured I would cover it. And, I covered the two highest, the ones that got the two highest points in the previous show. So now we're just going to devote some time to just talking about this topic. As I said, I talked about this about 2.5 years ago in the context of the demonstrations against people like Charles Murray and others at universities that were, to some extent at least, motivated by this view of intersectionality, and we'll kind of try to connect the views of intersectionality with the whole free speech debate, in addition to everything else going on. I also want to give you a specific example of how these views manifest themselves in our school system, and just an example I ran across today, even though it's not directly, in a sense, they don't call it intersectionality, but it's clearly influenced by this whole line of thinking. And that is that the Seattle school district right now, Seattle school system right now, is considering in its math curriculum introducing the ethnic studies into math curriculum, and we'll go over some of the stuff that they want to teach as part of math. In terms of a curriculum. Now, Mauricio says there's no sound. You guys okay with sound? Everybody got sound? Sound? Somebody? Just let me know. Let me know if there's no sound. Here, all systems are good. So here, everything looks like there is sound and everything is good. But Yoav Levi says, yeah to what? Yeah, there's sound. Yeah, there's no sound. I don't know. Sound is fine on YouTube. All right, hopefully on Facebook as well. We'll also look at a website where you can, because I'm sure you're going to be curious after my presentation, you will actually be able to, determine your intersectionality score. So we're actually going to go over the website and look at it in detail and see the kind of factors that at least this one website think goes into an intersectionality score. And then you can play around with it. You can actually get your intersectionality score and see what that means. And again, I don't know who put this website up, but it looks legit. And we can also look at the stuff they've got written here. I think that part's going to be horrifying and amusing at the same time if you've got that kind of sick sense of humor. Which I think you have to have, given the world in which we live. Somebody's saying on YouTube that they want an objectivist to talk about dating. That's great. You'll have to find a different objectivist, because I've been married too long to have any knowledge or experience or expertise in dating. Thank God, that is one thing I do not have to do anymore. All right, so. Let's jump into it. Intersectionality is in the news. It is what motivates much of the so-called social justice warriors that are online. It is a major topic of intellectual topic, academic topic of the left. It is what motivates Antifa. It is what motivates many of the demonstrations out there, or at least their interpretation of intersectionality. And we'll get to the question about what intersectionality is or isn't, and so on. But it's a big deal on the left, and indeed on the right. I think Ben Shapiro did a video on the evils of intersectionality, and pretty much everybody on the right has commented at some point or another about it. So, I think my approach is going to be somewhat different, but it's everywhere. It is a topic because of the left's dominance. It's a massive topic, and it's incredibly influential. And I think the more it's taken seriously, the worse our culture becomes. It's one of the real pseudo-intellectual enemies of individualism, of capitalism, of freedom, and of civilization, really. So let's start by trying to figure out where it comes from, because in its original roots, it's an original academic roots. It comes actually from the law profession. I wouldn't say it's benign, because even then, as I'll mention, it implies certain things, and it is based on certain assumptions about the law that I think are distorted and perverted. But it's not anywhere near as horrific as how it's morphed and become over the last few decades. So intersectionality really has two strands that come together in about 30 years ago. And the one strand is a strand that comes from feminism. The other strand is a strand that comes from what is called critical race theory, but really the idea of racism and discrimination. And it was developed by primarily women, and primarily minority women in academia, and primarily the woman who actually coined the term and wrote what I considered the seminal papers in this field was a woman by the name, or is a woman by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw. And I might not be pronouncing her first name right, but it's something like Kimberly Crenshaw, who is an academic. She's a professor at both Columbia University and the University of California, Los Angeles. Now, both of these strands rest on certain truths that are then distorted and perverted and lead us to where we are today. And the truths are that women have been discriminated against in a variety of different places, in a different contexts, whether it's in the workforce, in universities, in our school system, and they, the feminist movement, at least in its origination and its initial ideas of reducing or eliminating discrimination where it was inapplicable, where it did not belong, discrimination based on irrelevant factors, and sex being an irrelevant factor when it comes to certain professions, or I'd say most professions, certainly not all, but most professions, and ability being the main issue, and we'll get to ability later. So rests on that idea, eliminating discrimination and establishing equal rights before the law, equal rights for liberty and freedom. Of course, feminism has taken many strange turns since then, and part of one of those turns is this idea that our whole way of life, the whole structure of society, is geared against women. That there are, and we'll get to how this is connected to intersectionality, that the patriarchy, what's called the patriarchy, is a structure within society that men established. Men have been in control all along. We've established, I'm a man, I guess, we've established a structure over society. We've done it whether consciously or unconsciously, but we've done it to favor men and discriminate against women. And it's not just enough to tell people, it's not just enough to educate and to encourage. In order to really eliminate the structural problems that men have created that discriminate against women, basically one has to completely undo current society and current civilization. And of course, a big part of this in the modern terms is we have to undo capitalism, because capitalism and the whole political system, for example, American political system, is structured in favor of men and antagonistic to women, and they find all these structural, supposedly, and the law, by the way, the entire system of law is structured in a way that discriminates against, and we have to completely redo legal philosophy, legal thinking, legal precedent, in order to readjust all the structures in society, including the law, in order to get rid of this discrimination against women. And this is, of course, one trend within, this is a big part of modern feminism, and one of the things that lead towards intersectionality. And part of this is support for legal remedies against discrimination in the workforce. So part of this is support for the Civil Rights Act that basically makes it illegal to discriminate even in private places, private businesses, on the basis of race, sex, and now sexual orientation, and so on. So the whole idea is it applies to lawsuits. So, and they say, well, discrimination is everywhere, so you should be able to basically, we need a lawsuits against discrimination is not enough. All right, so that's one trend, one piece that goes through kind of the feminist movement. The other comes through the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement that, again, started on the basis of something positive and correct and just, which is to get rid of discrimination against blacks. Both discrimination, legal discrimination, was instituted into the law, just like there was against women. They couldn't vote, for example, but was against blacks during the Jim Crow era. But also to educate people and to morally convince people to stop being racist, to condemn racism morally, and to change people's behavior. But again, in modern times, this idea of critical race theory has developed that says none of this is enough. Indeed, you cannot really educate people not to be racist. It's ingrained in who we are and what we are, for example, as white people. We cannot not be, as white people, in the world as it is today. In a utopia, yes, we can be not racist. But in the world as it is today, we cannot be, even if we have the best of intentions. It's ingrained, in a sense, in our cultural DNA, in the structure of our society, and how we're raised from day one. Every aspect of what we do reinforces the inherent racism that we all engender. And therefore, the only way to achieve a colorblind society, which they claim, at least some of them claim, is what they want in a utopia, is to completely destroy society today in a sense of the structures, the mechanisms, the hierarchies, like destroy capitalism, destroy our political system, and start over. And start over in a way that has a lot of reverse discriminations, in a sense, teaches us, not by educating our minds, but by teaching us through experience what it's like to be oppressed. So reverse discrimination for the critical race theory is one of the mechanisms, not the only mechanism, but one of the mechanisms by which to, in a sense, get rid of the inherent racism that's in us all. Now, some of them believe it's in our genes and you can't get rid of it, and we just have to structure society in order to take into account the fact that white people are just born racists, and therefore they'll always be racist. So we have to constantly put them down and marginalize them so their racism can't manifest itself. Both this modern feminist and this critical race theory both believe that the structure of society should be challenged and rethought completely from scratch on the basis that there is structural discrimination in everything that we do. Now, the first introduction of the idea of intersectionality was in a court case. Let me just find the court case. In a court case about 30 years ago, and it was D. Graffenried versus General Motors, 1976 court case, in which 5 black women sued General Motors for a seniority policy that they argued targeted black women exclusively, right? Black women exclusively. So, and they basically said, and basically what happened was that before 1964, General Motors did not hire black women. So there were no black women who worked at GM before 1964. Meaning that once you got into seniority and you were laying people off based on seniority, well, the people who had joined recently tended to be black women, or all the black women who joined were relatively recent hires, so they got laid off first. Right? So all the black women hired after 1964 were fired. And they claimed discrimination for being black women. Now, the court ruled that this was not a legitimate claim. And why wasn't it a legitimate claim? Because they didn't sue because they were black. There's protection against discrimination against blacks. And they didn't sue because they were women. There is indeed discrimination against, women in the workforce. No. See, they sued because they were black women. And there's just no category in the law of black women being protected. Now, this is a weird reading of the law, I think, but that's how the courts ruled. So the idea that there's a category that is black women that might have been discriminated against, not because they were women, not because they were black, but because they were black and women at the same time, was something the courts could not address. Right? And this law professor, by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw, basically wrote a paper that said, this is ridiculous. And she said, basically, there is this category of black women that experience discrimination in a different way than black men do, and in a different way than white women do. And this is the intersection. The intersection is between their blackness and the fact that they're women. And that's a new category of people being discriminated against. Now, you think about it and say, yeah, in a legal, technical sense, yeah, I mean, that's kind of stupid. If we got laws that protect blacks and we got laws that protect women, and if it's a black women who are being fired because they're black women. Now, the problem, of course, is not that we need to create these additional categories in the law. The problem is that the law is dealing with discrimination. That is, it's not the business of the law, shouldn't be the business of the law, and the law has to, by definition, get into trouble and fail when it is given an irrational mandate. And the irrational mandate here is to try to eliminate discrimination in private companies. It's none of the law's business what a private business does. It's not the job of the law to eradicate irrationality from society. The job of the law is to adjudicate violations of individual rights. It's to protect us from the use of force and coercion. But there is no coercion in a business voluntarily choosing not to hire certain people, or to hire certain people and then fire them by whatever criteria they want to. There is no coercion there. There is no force. And therefore, the state, the government, the law has no business interfering. But once the law interferes, you get these convoluted situations. Well, what about protecting this minority and that minority and this minor minority and this sub-minority of that minority and all these other things? So the first reference to intersectionality was a paper diagnosing this and other legal cases in which the discrimination was not against one of the major kind of blocks, race, ethnicity, race or gender, but in the intersection of these things. Now, since then, this has been developed much, much further, right? Because since then, now all we have is, and this is, I'd say, intersectionality has manifested itself in this way over the last few years and brought to the public awareness in the last few years, in this particular way. Now, every individual is now categorized, according to intersectionality, by all the ways in which they might be discriminated against, in which they might be oppressed, and all the ways in which they might be an oppressor, or where they are an oppressor structurally, because of who they are. Again, if you're white, you are an oppressor, according to critical race theory. And this is the application of that, but now it's not just white. If you're heterosexual, since heterosexuals are the majority in society, you are likely to be an oppressor of those who are not heterosexual because you are the majority. If you identify as male or female, you are likely to be an oppressor of those who don't identify as male or female, or who are male and identify as female, or the other way around, or however it goes, or whatever the politically correct way of describing all that happens to be in the moment. Right? If you are wealthy, you are probably an oppressor of the poor, or by definition you are an oppressor of the poor, because wealth is a form of oppression, according to intersectionality. So we now layer and categorize individuals into sub-minorities, sub-groups, all based on the degree to which they are oppressed. And of course, intersectionality, the whole theory, has come out of law schools and just the application to these particular unusual legal situations, and now is being broadly applied to all cultural, educational, political analysis. And this is being taught at our universities as a way of discovering truth. You cannot know anything until you know how, where you place on this intersectionality framework. And we're going to go through an exercise, and you can all measure your own intersectionality. I'll be doing that in a second. We'll do mine, and we'll see how intersectional I am, and whether I'm an oppressor or whether I oppress. I mean, I think we can all guess which one I am, but it'll be kind of, you can all do this at home by yourselves. I'll show you the website. I mean, it truly is, and by the way, the whole idea here is, I mean, at least Crenshaw says, no, the whole idea here is for her, at least, and I don't really think she's completely honest about this, but she wants people to do all this because she wants to ultimately get rid of all racism, She wants ultimately a colorblind, genderblind, blind experience. But in order to get there, what we need to do is overturn every single existing structure, every single institution that we have in the West. It very much, and this is why people associate this, they call it cultural Marxism. I don't like the term cultural Marxism because I don't think Marx would like the term cultural Marxism. I don't think it's true reflection of what Marx talked about. Marx talks about one particular, and these people have they deploy some of his methodology, but not all of it. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but this is why there's a certain similarity to Marxism in this sense. Marx believed that there was these inequalities in the world, and that inherent in the inequalities was that the people who were poor, the workers, were inherently unfree. And they were unfree because they couldn't do what they wanted to do. I don't know if you just saw a video, you might have seen a video I put up a few days ago of a UT student telling me, asking in the Q&A something like, but I'm graduating soon and I don't want to work. I want to pursue my hobbies. I want to do whatever I want to do. Well, Marx sympathized with that. That was Marx. Why can't everybody just do what they want to do? And Marx said, in order to get to that utopia one day, everybody, and it doesn't matter where you're born a bourgeoisie, no matter what you're born, everybody one day will be able to do whatever they want to do. Now, not exactly in the caveats and everything, but his utopia, Marxist utopia, is this place where all our material needs are somehow taken care of by somehow, robots supposedly, I don't know. And therefore, we are all rich enough to be able to do what we want to do. And indeed, a Marxist utopia is a rich utopia. It's not a poor utopia. It's not Venezuela. It's not the Soviet Union in terms of its success. It's a super rich society. In order to get there, in order to get to this ideal of freedom, we must undo all of our institutions. We must turn everything upside down. And to quote Lenin, if we have to break a few eggs in doing that, it's worth it because the utopia is so beautiful and so important, and we'll all be free, really free, according to Marxists, to do whatever we want to do, or at least whatever is metaphysically available to us, because yes, we won't be able to fly. But who knows? Maybe genetic engineers, they'll build us wings and we will be able to fly. Right? So, notice it's the same principle, except here, the ideal is not equality, material equality. It's not equality of wealth, the kind of material equality Marx is going for. But it's actually equality of everything. And we'll see that the intersectionalities even consider ability to be a problem. That's something that needs to be corrected for. They want us all to be the same. And the only way to do that is to break a few eggs and, get rid of capitalism and discriminate against the people who have been doing the discriminating in the past and pay slave reparations. So there's a sense in which the reparations for slaves is a part of this. Because it doesn't matter, it's a question Jennifer asked, it doesn't matter that you as an individual weren't a slave owner. You, by being white, are the equivalent of a slave owner. You, by being white, are somehow responsible for the fact that slavery existed. And by the way, you, by being white, have benefited, this is the other key, right? Economically, culturally, institutionally, you have benefited from the fact that there were slave owners. Your wealth has been built by a generation of white people that you then, I guess, inherited some of that wealth. But not just the wealth. The institutions, capitalism, which they claim made slavery possible, right? You inherited all that. You have benefited from all that. You have benefited from the institutional slavery if you're white in America. And therefore, we must pay reparations because blacks are the opposite. It's not enough that they were freed, because all the institutions created as a result of racism continue to oppress them, continued to make them poor, continued to discriminate against them. And therefore, the only way is to give them reparations, but the real intersectionalists and the real, far-out leftists don't just believe in reparations. They believe in upending the entire system. The entire system. And they don't recognize the idea. They don't recognize the idea that it's possible or it's legitimate in any way to remedy the problem by getting rid of it because they don't believe you can get rid of it. They don't believe education is enough. They don't believe that as long as you have capitalism, that as long as you have separation of powers in government, as long as you have the legal system that we inherited, I guess, from the British, the common law system and all that, as long as those exist, they believe institutionalized discrimination is institutionalized. It's part of the system. This is why the radical is the bad word. They want to destroy everything in order to see this Marxist-like utopia at the end of the destruction. And the reason I think at the end of the day they're nihilists is because I don't think they really believe in that utopia. What they really believe in is the destruction. Now, what is this all? Now, let me just say, here's some of the criteria by which, if you want to be sensitive to intersectionality, if you want to be sensitive to social justice and to the realities of the world out there. So there is this is from 10 tips for putting intersectionality into practice, put together by the Opportunity something Foundation or something like that. I can't remember. So 10 tips for putting intersectionality into practice. So write these down, guys. I'm only going to talk about the first one because, get bogged down forever in this. So recognize that there are multiple forms of systematic discrimination that block people from realizing equal opportunity in the United States. They're all about equal opportunity. And there's systematic discrimination, but there are multiple forms on it. So what do you do? What you have to recognize is this. The intersectional approach acknowledges systemic discrimination due to, start making the list, guys, sexual orientation and identity, gender and gender identity, race, economic status, immigration status, national origin, and ability, among other aspects of one's identity. So they're leaving it open to all other ways in which there could be systemic discrimination. And that this systemic discrimination impacts access to opportunity. Now, you really get the nihilism and the complete, cynicism, if you will, of this approach by them putting their ability, right? So you're discriminated against because of your ability. So if you want to be a computer programmer and you don't have the ability to be a computer programmer, that is systemic discrimination. And of course, that is systemic discrimination because you don't have the ability. And capitalism requires ability to get a job. Living requires ability to survive. But that's discriminatory. And capitalism as a system is structurally discriminating against people of low ability. Yes, that's true. Acknowledged. And this is why they have to upend capitalism. They have to destroy capitalism. And they have to destroy the whole system. But it's not just, it's every aspect of our culture. Ability matters in every aspect. And that's why every aspect of our culture needs to be destroyed. And you notice how you start with some beginnings that have some legitimacy. Some legitimacy. Real discrimination against women. Real discrimination against minorities. Ethnic minorities. Real discrimination against gays. Real discrimination against transgender people. And so real cultural problems. Real issues that need to be addressed. And in some cases, real legal problems. The legality of which needs to be upturned, like slavery, like Jim Crow laws, like, not allowing women to vote. But then it slowly drifts into, well, we can't rely on people's choices. We can't rely on reason. We can't rely on rationality. Not all these documents never mention thinking. Never mention thinking. It's all about feeling, emoting. Now, what is this all? It truly is an anti-reason, anti-rationality. It is focused on the idea that we really don't have free will. We are pre-programmed either by our genes or by our culture to have particular attitudes that cannot be reversed or cannot be reversed in any significant way. And we'll see, whoops, what happened to my, there was my intersectionality calculator. They cannot be reversed in any significant way, and therefore, we must penalize you for this. The only way to get rid of it is by penalizing, and by those who are structurally forced to, have to discriminate, and benefiting, rewarding those who are structurally, by necessity, going to be discriminated against. So it's a rejection of free will, of education, although one of their efforts, their big efforts, is introduce this thinking into preschools and into primary schools and high schools. So they do believe somewhat that education is important. But the purpose of education is not to create what you would call, to educate people against discrimination. The purpose of the education is to get kids who are the discriminators to start feeling bad about themselves, who they are, what they are, and to elevate the kids who are being discriminated against, to give them ammunition. In a sense, it's a way in which to enforce reparations, but psychologically. So it's a rejection of free will. It's a rejection of the idea that one can change and the idea that one can be rational and that one can indeed not discriminate. It's also the ultimate in tribalism. It's not enough that we have 2 tribes or 5 tribes or 20 tribes. Now we have hundreds of tribes. Tribes of white people versus every other color in the rainbow, but then it's not just white versus the colors, it's white gay versus white straight, but it's not even that. It's white gay and male or female or cisgender or transgender or rich or poor or younger or older, and on it goes, and every one of those is a smaller subgroup. But of course, they get it smaller and smaller, but they will not get to small enough to recognize that the only group that matters, that the only minority that exists, and the only minority that needs protection is the individual. Because it's not about protecting. It's about shaming and guilt for those who are categorized based on that they are in the oppressing groups. It's not about raising up. It's about knocking down. I mean, this is the ultimate in tribalism. And of course, what the left doesn't realize, or maybe it does realize and doesn't care, and I've said this many, many times, that this plays right into the hands of the white supremacists. This plays right into the hands of the neo-Nazis. This plays right into the hands of the alt-right. Because they basically, their response is, yeah, we agree. We can play this game. But you know what? We're not going to let you destroy our ability to discriminate against you. Indeed, we're going to intensify that. And we're going to rally more people to our cause because they're now being oppressed by you. And there are enough out there that don't feel guilty. We're going to collect our little tribe around the rejection of intersectionality. And to a large extent, I think, as I said many times, I think the rise of the alt-right, even the election of Donald Trump, are the consequence of the left's nuttiness. The left is now, again, tribalism has always existed. Racism has always existed. I think there were periods in which it's declined. I think there were periods in which racism declined in America, post the civil rights era. And I think that's coming back stronger, bigger, because of what the left is doing. I think the white supremacist, the racism of white supremacy, which I think faded somewhat from American culture, is now really resurrecting. And yeah, somebody says the alt-right started in 1969. I don't know. When I did my research on the alt-right, it didn't seem that it started back then. But even if it did, that makes sense because It was a rejection originally of the reverse discrimination of affirmative action. But, you know, it's grown dramatically in the era of critical race theory, in the era of, you know, intersectionality. Intersectionality is going to make the white supremacists much worse. Now, this isn't the reason to get rid of it. I'm just saying it's part of what's going to happen. The more tribal you get, the more tribal we will be. And in this country, the tribe of white men is still the biggest one. And they're going to aggregate together, and they're a dangerous group. It's also a reflection of altruism when taken seriously. If altruism is the standard morality, then the needier you are, the more elevated you get in terms of how much everybody needs to sacrifice for you. Altruism is the morality that says that your purpose in life is to live for those in need. Well, who's in need? Well, there's the black, transgender, whatever minority over there. They're the most in need. And anybody who's not them needs to sacrifice for them. And intersectionality gives us a pyramid of need. Who are the most needy? Who are the most oppressed? Who is the least needy? Who is the least oppressed? And that's what intersectionality does. It creates scores. We're going to go over the score in a minute. Of where you land up. How oppressed are you? And of course, what should you do if you have a score that suggests that you're very oppressive? In the case of this calculator, low score. It means you're oppressive. Well, then you should sacrifice for those who are being oppressed. So this is altruism in action. This is the inevitable consequence of altruism combined with disintegration, combined with a lack of, in a sense, a religion that guides your sacrifice in a particular direction. God, one. Now, we sacrifice everywhere. Completely disintegrated. Combined with the nihilism of the modern world, intersectionality is all that lumped together. And as such, it's a disaster. Now, again, the original identification in the original law paper was okay. But the whole basis of the law, that the government has a role in telling private people whether they should discriminate or not, is irrational and wrong. But once that law is accepted, this is the path it has to take. So the original law paper, given the context, is okay. But then where intersectionality has landed up and its remedy of complete and utter disaster, complete and utter undoing of everything that has made civilization what it is, all the pro-life aspects of civilization that everybody benefits from, including those who are supposedly so oppressed, is horrific. I'll say one more point about this, and then we'll do the calculator. And that is that there is a strong element of original sin here. And this is, again, in Western culture, it seems like there's always original sin comes out somewhere. If you're white, you're by definition bad. You're by definition, you have original sin by being born white. Same if you're straight. Same if you're, cisgender, I guess it's called. And so on. You're supposed to feel guilty. Guilt, I've said this often in talks, guilt is an unbelievably powerful tool to control people. And ultimately, every agenda like this has to be at the end of the day about controlling people. about controlling society, about control, just like Marx had to go through a dictatorship of the proletarian. There's no question that what these people seek is a dictatorship of the oppressed. And in this case, that's why, they're anti-free speech. They're anti-really freedom in every aspect of it, because that freedom is just a manifestation of those structural injustices. All right, we're going to do the intersectionality calculator, and then I see there's a bunch of questions. I'm going to take some of them, the ones related to the topic. Then we're going to go to this case in Seattle, this school system in Seattle, and what's happening there. And then I'll take the rest of the questions that you have, all right? So we are going to do that. Let's start with this. All right, whoops, wrong one, that one. This is the intersectionality score calculator. I can see at the top of the screen that you can't really see it saying intersectionality. Believe me, that's what it says. You can find it. If you just Google intersectionality, it jumps up. It's the first one. It's a paid ad, right? And you can see it says your intersectionality score is, let's say we start with 50, and 50 suggests that you are more privileged. Privilege means you are an oppressor, right? You are oppressing people. You are more privileged than 28% of others. So there are 28% of people out there who are more oppressed than I am if I score 50. I don't score 50, but if I score to 50. Please give more to those less fortunate. There's the altruism for you. Please get, and it doesn't matter what you score on this, there's always going to be somebody less fortunate, and the message here is still going to be, please give more to those less fortunate. Now, what I find particularly disgusting here is the quotes they use. Martin Luther King, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. One of the great quotes. Truly a great quote. But you're judging everybody by the skin right here, right in this calculator. It's exactly what you're doing. Now they're claiming again that the only way to get to a colorblind society is by putting on, by addressing colors, by recognizing colors, by discriminating based on color. Now that's a contradiction, but it is what they believe. They also use the quote of, the best way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. Yeah. And Muhammad Ali saying, hating people because of their color is wrong, and it doesn't matter which color does the hating. It's just wrong. Yeah. Those are great quotes, all 3 of them. I accept all of those quotes. And yet, this is the calculator. Right? And this is serious, right? So if you look here, what is an intersectionality score? I don't know if you can see that on the right side. On the right side, it says, what is an intersectionality score? It's an easy and effective way to measure the systematic oppression and discrimination faced by an individual due to their unique identity factors. Having a high intersectionality score means being faced with more challenges to get ahead than someone who has a low score. How can they be used? The score has many practical uses. Primarily, it can be used to help those who are historically marginalized. In an office setting, you can easily identify those who may have unique and most often overlooked or disregarded perspectives. You can give exclusive opportunities and promotions to people with high intersectionality scores so that they become more respected in positions of power. So we should elevate them, not based on ability, but based on how low their intersectionality score is. This should be guiding for promotions and raises. We also suggest every group meeting to begin with everyone sharing their intersectionality scores. I mean, this is truly insane. Oh, I'm so miserable. Let me share it with the group. The most powerful use of intersectionality is to identify oppressors. The most powerful use of intersectionality is to identify oppressors and encourage them to share their privilege and money, in parentheses, right? with the victims of their oppression. This would produce a more inclusive outcome and improve overall diversity. Can I use this calculator on others? Yes. Many people say that they, let me raise this so you can read this along with me. Many people say that they enjoy calculating intersectional scores of others so they can easily identify and help those who are faced with systemic oppression. Once you know which of your friends have higher scores, you might find that you have something to learn from them. Because if they're more oppressed, they have more to teach me, right? Because everything is through the glasses of power, oppression, politics. That's all that matters. Can I be accused of being oppressive, even if I have a high score? Yes. Having a high intersectionality score doesn't completely immunize you from being called an oppressor. You may be vulnerable to weakest link attacks, that is, being called an oppressor on any of the intersectionality factors by those disadvantaged in that factor. For example, a gay black man could be accused of being a misogynist by women, or a poor immigrant woman could be called transphobic by a trans person. Again, we suggest you publicly show your support for more oppressed groups regardless of your feelings. Can you believe this stuff? All right, how are the scores calculated? We carefully consider the factors that make up various forms of social pressure and oppression. Then, using multivariate analysis, we are able to calculate and contribute the contribution that each factor has on an individual relative to demographic size. This is bullshit statistics and bullshit science, but okay, let's do it, guys. All right. Now, usually I don't answer questions like this, but we're doing the calculator and we want to know, right? Am I white or am I a person of color? I guess I'm white. Look. Am I straight or gay? Straight as can be. Male or female? I'm male. And not just am I male, I actually identify as a male, which means I guess I'm cisgender. I didn't ever know there was a term for that. And neither of those are ambiguous. Am I rich or poor? My guess is I score here on the rich side. Am I younger or older? I think I'm on the older side here. Am I able-bodied, disabled? I'm kind of, I don't know if they count my back and, my knee and, just all the hurt that I'm going through. I'm going to say, I'm probably not as disabled as somebody is in a wheelchair or something, so I'm okay, all right? Jennifer, somebody says, I'm Jewish, so I'm not white. There's a Jewish question, so don't worry, they cover that. We'll get to the Jewish part. Is English my first language? It's not my first, but it's not my second either, so I'm going to stay neutral in this one because I kind of got English. Where was I born? Well, they know I'm in Puerto Rico because I guess they picked it up from my IP address, and I'm not born in Puerto Rico, so I'm born elsewhere. I'm not sure what that means because born in Puerto Rico, yeah, anyway, I don't know. More educated, less educated. I'm pretty much as educated as you can get based on my degrees and stuff. Am I Christian or not a Christian? Well, I'm not a Christian. This is in my favor because being a Christian is definitely oppressive. Am I Muslim or not a Muslim? This I fail because, if I was a Muslim, I would be oppressed. Jewish or not Jewish? I pretty much go on the non-Jewish spectrum, assuming they mean religion. And by giving devout Jewish over here, I think they mean religion. So I don't know what I should say here. I'm open to suggestion, but let me go a little bit towards non-Jewish, but not all the way because, ethnically I'm Jewish. I don't know what that means. So are you guys in suspense? Because I'm in real suspense about what my intersectionality score is. Oh my God. A wave of guilt just flooded me because I'm a 17. And basically what that means is I am a massive oppressor, right? 76% of people in America who have taken the survey, 76% of the people who've taken the survey are more oppressed than I am. And I should give to those less fortunate. So there's the pitch for altruism. And how can you not feel guilty about that? I'm an oppressive guy. And I guess I have to start giving. I mean, is anybody out there who's on my show have a higher score than me? Maybe I'll have to send you some money rather than me asking for the support of the show. I'll have to share some of my money with you. Now, what's interesting is which factors make you more oppressive? Because I was wondering. Obviously, education makes you more oppressive. So, for example, if I was less educated, then my score goes up to 20, and now only 70%. Or less. So, education, I shouldn't have got that PhD, man. I'm so, Now, if English was my first language, my score would be even lower, 15. That's pretty scary. So I'm glad that I studied English kind of, not quite as my second language, but kind of in between. I mean, I could have been disabled. That would have really, my score went way up to 21. Well, only 4 points. I mean, the real biggies, let's put the disabled back so that I'm like at 16. But if I was female, what would that do? Whoa, automatic 31. Whoa, automatic 31. So, Jennifer, everybody else there females who are on the chat right now, you should feel a lot less guilty than I am. Just by the very fact that you're female is added wow. And then let's say if I was gay, also a big one, right? And transgender, this one would be big, I think. Transgender, no, not as much as gay. All right, not as much as gay. Interesting. Wow. All right. And poor, that one I have control of. I could give away all my money. I can't turn myself into gay. 21, didn't raise enough. I'm not giving my money away. I'll take the guilt and not give my money away, right? I mean, do you get what this is doing? We now literally have intersectionality scores. Now, note some of the questions here. I love this one. This is the best ever, right? How can I improve my score? And they give an honest answer. Unfortunately, you're born with most of your intersectional factors. However, you can make some improvements to your score by getting more involved with Islam or Judaism. So, they recognize the Islam or Judaism are chosen. I wonder if I can choose to be gay or choose to be transgender. Donate, and this is another way, by the way, you can, if you want to, increase your score, which I guess is a good thing. They want you to increase your score. You can donate all excess wealth to charity, or explore the wild side of your sexuality. So yes, you can play around with being less straight and cisgender. You can play around with your sexuality and explore the wild side. But you can only be wild in sex, according to this, if you also reject your maleness and your, in my case, straightness. So just being wild with sex with a woman wouldn't raise my, so being wild with sex with a woman wouldn't raise my intersectional score. I'd have to be wild in sex with a man. The easiest way to improve your score, however, I could wear a dress, Jennifer says. I could. That's right. I would get a higher score if I wore a dress. I'd guess I'd be less cisgender if I wore a dress. I'm not wearing a dress. I'm wearing shorts, and I'm barefoot, as I always am doing the show in Puerto Rico. But I don't think that raises... I don't think shorts and barefoot, even though... and living in Puerto Rico raise my intersectionality score. They should, but they don't. But they say, and here's the altruism, guys, the easiest way to improve your score, is to champion the intersectionality of your more marginalized friends. So if you're feeling guilty right now, you could go out there and be a champion for intersectionality by giving raises and promoting people who have higher scores than you do. And you can award yourself up to 5 points depending on the level of your activism. Now I understand the social justice warriors. Really, all they're trying to do is to raise their intersectionality score, reduce their guilt by being social justice warriors, they did the score and they got a very low score, so they're out there being activists because they can get 5 points. 5 points! I'm so psyched. I know how to do this. Why include religion? Some have commented that religious sliders are anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, atheist-phobic, or possibly even Christianophobic. They included to show that a complete intersectionality score embraces the diversity of religion, religious thought, if they are of a minority group. Remember, only minorities. You can't discriminate against the majority. The majority must be discriminated against because that's the only way they can redeem themselves. This one's good. What about peanut allergies? Come on, give us a break here. What about our peanut allergies? We know that hundreds of other factors such as political affiliation, height, attractiveness, weight, and even peanut allergies can impact your personal intersectionality score. Hopefully, we will be able to address these factors in the future. Height, the short transgender, black, female, Muslim, poor person with a peanut allergy. That's the group I want to sacrifice to. That's the group that counts. And you know what the sad thing is? Again, the sad thing is here is that there is racism out there. There is irrational discrimination out there. All these things do actually indeed exist. Right? All these things exist. Now, I don't know if this is a parody site or not. It says the right things. It's presented honestly. I don't know. I have no idea. But that's what makes it so nutty, is how do you tell? When reality, ideology becomes so ridiculous, so insane, so nutty. Somebody's paying to have this advertised, to get traffic to this place. And here's the graph of they've run this thing 1 million times. And this is the distribution. Whoops, let me make sure you can see it. Here's the distribution of the scores. And you can see most of us are oppressors, and there are few that are being oppressed. And these people, the oppressors, should be sacrificed for the few who are being oppressed. So, I don't know. If somebody really figures out what this is, let me know, because I have no idea. Here are all the comments. I tried to look at, home statistics, but it doesn't really tell us. Here's most oppressed. It gives you the cross, trans and Muslim, gay, lesbian, and Muslim, right? It gives you different statistics of all this stuff. Pretty funny. Pretty depressing. Pretty sad. Intersectionality scored by country. Wow. India is the most intersectional place in the world. Has the most oppression. There we go. And they keep going on. So somebody's put some thought into this, done it. And whether it's a parody site or not, hard to tell. But okay, so let me flip back to this, and let me close that, and let's see. Is reparations part of this? I talked about that to some extent. It is. Let's see. Is the transgender movement related to primacy of consciousness mentality? How do you think of biological actual males competing against women? Look, I don't have strong views about the whole transgender thing, and so first, I think it's horrific that biological males who view themselves as females, even if they've had certain surgery, should compete in women's athletics. I think that's absurd. That's ridiculous. There's no reason to have women's athletics. The reason to have women's athletics is there's something biologically different about women than men. And if men can then pretend, or even if they believe truly, fully, completely, that they are women, they still have the body of a man. And therefore, they shouldn't be allowed to compete against women. I think it's bizarre that they are, and it's not fair to the woman, and it's completely wrong. With regard to whether transgender is a primacy of conscience, now the movement, I think, is, much of the movement is bizarre. And again, it's much more focused on putting down everybody else, creating guilt among straight people than it is about elevating the treatment of transgender people. But look, I believe that there are people out there who have real psychological belief that they are a man trapped in a body of a woman, or the other way around. That whatever it is about the way they grew up, whatever it is about the choices they made, or whatever it is about their psychology, they really hold that. And are willing to go to unbelievable lengths to manifest that, including surgery that truly mutilates them. Now, I think that's horrible and sad. I mean, more than anything, it's sad. But it's a reality. You can't negate the reality. And I don't think that by definition these people are, somebody here in the chat wrote, that they're freaks. I mean, they're unusual, they're different, so I only know one person like this, a man who became a woman, and today is one of the most famous economists, political theorists in the kind of free market movement, and her name is Deirdre McCloskey. She was Donald McCloskey, and you can find a book, you can find Deirdre McCloskey's books on Amazon, and they're worth reading. They're hard to read, they're pretty, but they're really interesting. And and I know I've been at conferences with, I've traveled with her. She's fascinating, really, really interesting, has a lot of interesting theories, wrong, really wrong on a lot of stuff. She happens to be religious, she's an Anglican, real believer in God. Every time she mentions Adam Smith in a talk, she crosses herself. But she's a fascinating person, even though she's a man who turned into a woman, which is kind of strange, certainly for me. So, and she's brilliant. There's no question she's brilliant. She's wrong. That doesn't matter. She's brilliant. And I'd read her books, and I'd go to her lectures, and I think you should too, because they're fascinating. She's a really good speaker. And I don't know what to do with somebody like that. I don't know how to completely evaluate somebody like that. But they are what they are. And I think it's sad in her life. There's a lot of sad stuff about her life because of this. I mean, think about what it entails. When she was a he was married, he was married, had kids. I mean, this is completely life-destroying, but it's a real psychological condition. I don't know if there's a way to undo the psychology. I don't know. A lot of these things cannot be undone. It is what it is. So to the extent that it's a real choice, or how deep the psychology is, I don't know. So I have no interest in discriminating against transgender in and of itself, unless there's some, judge them based on who they are, based on their merits, based on their character, based on what kind of person they are. Is it fair to say A equals anti-A for intersectional postmodernists? I reckon I'd be a good objective kitty if I worked out what their thinkers believe and then did the exact opposite. They don't believe in individuals. And in that sense, they reject the law of identity. They don't believe in free will, but so do a lot of people. Some of the people on chat here, some people who call themselves objectivists, don't believe in free will. And in that sense, you're rejecting reality. You're rejecting the world. You are A equals non-A. You're rejecting the law of identity. And there's a sense in which the whole transgender thing is a rejection of the law of identity. But that's really psychological, I think, more than intellectual, ideological. The intersectional movement is ideological, intellectual, And I think until it's repudiated, but repudiated and replaced by, not by bigotry, not by white supremacists, not by alt-right, but by individualism, it won't, nothing will happen. And indeed, most of the criticism from the right doesn't identify individualism as the solution. It tries to argue about the systemic nature of the racism or whatever, but that's you're not going to get anywhere. You have to argue against the collectivism. You have to argue against the tribalism. You have to argue against the altruism. You have to argue against the determinism. And you have to argue for individualism and for reason and for freedom, capitalism. Because those are the antidotes, the only antidotes. This is the insanity that started with Kant, gone through the postmoderns, through the German philosophers, Marx and everybody, through the postmoderns, through the world in which we live in today. This is the insanity that we have. They're taking real problems in reality, racism, sexism, anti-gay, whatever, and turning them into, the most horrific ideology possible that is going to lead to bloodshed and more discrimination that they could ever imagine. Would you consider doing another discussion with Douglas Murray, perhaps on your show? His new book, The Madness of Crowds, dives deep into this very topic. So it's interesting because I just got a text from, I think it was a Facebook message or something, a message from a guy in the UK who has just spoken to Douglas Murray recently, and Douglas expressed interest in doing another event with me. And he asked if I would do something with Douglas Murray at the University of Kent in England, and I'm definitely interested, and I would do it. The challenge is funding it, so I don't have funding to do an event with Douglas Murray at the University of Kent. So it would have to do an event where I got paid and Douglas got paid, and you'd probably have to raise, I don't know, probably $5,000 to $6,000, $7,000 to make it happen. So if somebody wants to fund that, we will do it. We'll videotape it. We'll put it online. We'll get it all done. But we need $5,000 to $7,000 to make it happen. Douglas is interested. I would do it. University of Kent Conservative Club, which is very active and very involved and would actually get a good audience, is interested in hosting it. It's just a matter of money, as many of these things usually are. So if there is anybody out there who would like to fund such an event, let me know and we'll make it happen. And generally, a lot of these questions about debate this person, debate that person, are usually boiled down to financials. Who's going to pay for it? Okay, that's Douglas Murray. Let me just see if there are any other questions about this. Should parents raise a kid as an opposite of their real sex from a very young age, before kids decide on their own, have the child taken away? I mean, that's a tough one. I think if they do the surgery, the child should be taken away. I mean, before the surgery, hopefully, because that's physical harm, damage in a way. If they pump him with hormones, I think they should be taken away. So let me be clear about this. Whatever you think about transgender, children should not be touched. Not physically. Not in the sense of hormones or in the sense of surgery. When they're adults, they can decide and they should have the freedom to do what they want. But children, I think that is disgusting and a disgrace. And I think it's really, really horrific. I mean, I know lots of people who, when they're young, think they want to be the opposite sex. Primarily girls who want to be boys, because boys have more fun when they're little, particularly in a society that discriminates against girls. If you grew up in a place in the world where girls cannot own property, girls cannot go outside by themselves, girls cannot play rough, then yeah, it's natural for you to want to be a boy. Lots of girls that I know who become the ultimate personification of femininity when they're older when they're young, are tomboys, what are called tomboys. They act like boys. And then suddenly, when they get those hormones kicking in at 13 and 14, they become sexual and they become, ultimately they become very feminine. So to make that decision for them before they've experienced that is so evil, so horrific, so disgusting. That to me is beyond the pale. And of course, parents who raised a kid of an opposite sex is the same, but I just don't know I'm not sure where the line is of such abuse that the state should intervene, right? So the fact that a child says, I want to be a boy, a girl says, I want to be a boy, or a boy says, I want to be a girl, should not be the basis for anything. A discussion, why? Encouraging them to act in ways that are consistent. Somebody says MGTOW. I've already talked about MGTOW. Horrible, horrible idea. All right. Here's what's happening in Seattle. And this is an outgrowth of all this kind of thinking. So now I'm getting this from, an education website. So not an ideological thing. I saw some articles from it in kind of conservative places, and I thought, oh, this can't be real. So I went and looked for the source, and the source is, I think, ed.com or something like that, some educational website for teachers. And this is the idea. The Seattle School District is planning to infuse all K through 12 math classes with ethnic studies questions that encourage students to explore how math has been appropriated by Western culture and used in systems of power and oppression. Now, this is straight out of this critical race theory and intersectionality. The whole idea that everything in the world out there is structured, including math, mathematics, algebra, calculus, addition and subtraction. Everything is political. Everything is about power. And everything has been structured by those in power, those with low intersectionality scores, to oppress those with high intersectionality scores who are out of power. And that includes math. And therefore, to remedy this, we must teach our kids how math was appropriated by the West. And math is not an invention of the West. Math has its origin in Arabia or in India and all these other cultures, or maybe even in Africa. And as a consequence, the idea that that we have today, that math is somehow Western, is completely wrong. Who cares? Math is math. You want to teach the history of math? Fine. There's a lot of ideas in math that came out of India and Arabia. So what? I mean, it's interesting historically, but it has nothing to do with math. Math is gender neutral. Math is race neutral. Math is opinion neutral, politics neutral, power neutral, oppression neutral. Not according to the intersectionalists, not according to the new left. The district's proposal, the article goes on to say, outlines strands of discussion that teachers should incorporate into their classes. One leads students into exploring math's roots, quote, in the ancient histories of people and empires of color. Yeah, it's really important. It's really important for kids to know that the foundations of math come from cultures of people of color. Why is that important? Because it'll boost their self-esteem to know that their group, that their little tribe actually achieved something 3,000 years ago. I mean, it's totally insanity. But this is what the combination of tribalism, determinism, altruism lead to, and have to lead to. This complete nuttiness. Another asks how math and science have been used to oppress and marginalize. people of color and those who hold power in a math classroom. I don't know who holds power in a math classroom. I guess the kids who know math. What does power have to do with a math classroom? Another theme focuses on resistance and liberation, encouraging students to recognize the mathematical practices and contributions of their own communities. What if my community had no contributions to math? I mean, zero contributions to math. I mean, my community is like objectivists. And the objectivists I know, it's not even all objectivists. I don't think that the objectivists I know have contributed anything to math. Now I'm feeling really oppressed. I mean, the whole way of looking at the world through this prism of race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, but at the end of the day, looking through a prism of power relationships, politics. This is the dominance of politics over everything, the dominance of power over everything, the dominance of force over everything. And it's disgusting. Seattle's proposals land as schools all over the country are discussing the role of ethnic studies should play in their curriculum. None, zero, nada. That's the role ethnic studies should play. In most places, if schools offer ethnic studies at all, it's usually in a standalone course in high school. That's not good enough. But increasingly, schools and districts are starting to sprinkle ethnic studies across the K through 12 curriculum. Seattle is taking a highly unusual approach by weaving the field's multicultural and political questions not just through all grade levels, but into all subjects. I mean, what do you do with this stuff? You know, there's a field called ethnomathematics. Ethnomathematics. Ethnomathematics is a field that studies the intersectionality again, of math and culture. And it took shape around the late 1970s when all this garbage took shape. Well, started earlier, but yeah. And their whole books, what is ethnomathematics and how can it help children in schools? Rehumanizing the other race, culture, and identity in education research. Ethnomathematics, challenging Eurocentrism in mathematical education. I mean, Ayn Rand could not imagine it this bad. There is nothing in Atlas Shrugged that the villains say that is anywhere close to this bad. I want to show you one other thing. Let me just get it up on screen. It'll be a second before I can get this up. Where is it? PDF, what's it called? www. There it is. There you go. This is the actual, I think you can see it. Let me just see that you can see it. Yeah, you can see this. This is the actual program. This is the actual thing, right? And you can see the definition of the theme is origins, identity, and agency as defined by ethnic studies is the way in which we view ourselves as mathematicians and members of broad mathematical communities. Not as an individual. We view ourselves as mathematicians through origins, identity, and agency. Through how the extent to our intersectionality score that we talked about earlier. Mathematical theory and application is rooted in the ancient histories of people and empires of color. No. Mathematical theory and application is rooted in achievements of individuals who came from a diverse groups of people and cultures, but it's individuals who made the achievements. Individuals who are focused on the math. It's not rooted in the ancient histories of people and empires of color. That's racism, collectivism, and tribalism. Power and oppression, definition of theme. Power and oppression as defined by ethnic studies are the ways in which individuals and groups define mathematical knowledge so as to see Western mathematics as the only legitimate expression of mathematical identity and intelligence. Now, what the hell is non-Western, or Western for that matter, mathematics? I've never heard of the term. And what does it mean to use mathematics to oppress people? This definition of legitimacy is then used to disenfranchise people and communities of color. Because math is Western, and if you're not Western, you're not part of the group. Where is that even a reality? Again, there's discrimination against girls in mathematics. Get that. Stop it. Maybe you can find some discrimination against minorities in mathematics. I don't know. Deal with a particular concrete, but the idea that there's Western mathematics and non-Western mathematics, and we discriminate against non-Western mathematics, it's just nonsense. This is taken seriously at our universities. You are sending your kids to study in places that this is taken seriously, where this is being taught. And of course now, if you are in Seattle, you are sending your kids to school where this garbage is being taught. Definition of theme. The history of resistance and liberation, as defined by ethnic studies, is the stories, places, and people who helped liberate people in communities of color using math. Access to mathematical knowledge itself is an act of liberation. All right, I've had enough. This whole thing is insanity. Insanity that has become more and more mainstream at American universities. Insanity that is now infecting every aspect of our school system, even math classes. An insanity that, if we don't overturn, is the end of our civilization. There's no coming back from this nonsense. There's no appeasing it. There's no compromising it. This has to be rejected wholeheartedly, and not in the name of a different tribalism, only in the name of reason, only in the name of individualism. Can one fight such ugliness? Only in the name of individualism. All right. Some super chat questions. What are your thoughts on the movie Gettysburg? You know, I saw it a long time ago, so I apologize, but I don't have any thoughts on the movie Gettysburg. I just don't remember it. Keep up the excellent work and merciless dedication to rationality. Yours is the most important work in the world. It is, but nobody's paying attention. It's a very, it's a very depressing job, I have to say. You deal with this garbage, and, yes, there are like 15,000 of you that maybe appreciate what I do, but that's nothing. That's like, and only, I'm not complaining, but in reality, only about 500 of you are willing to put dollars, willing to support the show. So really only 500 of you value the show. So it's hard to think that what you're doing is the most important work in the world when only about 500 people are willing to support it. So anyway. If a country becomes richer, more regulations against capitalism passed, is this the cause of convergence of economies, catch-up effect? Yes. Yes. The fact has been that the rich economies become more regulated, and also, the poorer country, the easier it is to get the next 10% of economic growth. As you grow, the harder it is to get the next. In a sense, the more dependent it is on freedom. That's why a relatively free country like the United States of America, but that is still heavily regulated, heavily taxed, and so on, cannot grow at more than 3% a year. Cannot. Because to grow at more than 3% a year, you need much, much more freedom. But a country like Vietnam, that in many respects is much more regulated than the U.S., and much more oppressive than the U.S., but is starting lower, can grow fast. But it is going to hit a barrier at some point where it will only be able to grow at 1 or 2%. You can see that in China right now. China, because of the regulations, because of controls, because of increased government regulations and controls, and because it has reached the capacity of growth given the level of regulation, cannot grow fast anymore unless it massively deregulates, unless it massively frees things up. So this is the way to think about it. For every level of freedom or lack of it, there is initial growth spurt and a cap at ongoing growth. And of course, the freer a country is, the higher that cap is, and the higher the ongoing growth is. And if you're completely free, there is no cap. You can grow at very high rates forever. But there is no completely free country in the world, and as a consequence, all countries now are capped in the level of growth that they can attain. But poor countries can go faster because those initial levels of growth are much easier than later. And the reason for that is, the richer you are, the next level of growth is more dependent on the mind. The poorer you are, you can still get away with creating wealth with muscle. The richer you are, the more it's going to have, the additional wealth is going to have from the mind. The mind is very, very sensitive to how free it is. More so than muscle. So you cannot grow unless you free up the mind, and what regulations do is the exact opposite of that. Do things get worse or stay the same without growth? They get worse. There is no such thing as staying the same. In one way or another, culturally, intellectually, morally, spiritually, emotionally, even if GDP stays flat, all those other things get worse. The world gets worse when the economy is flat. I was pleasantly surprised to find a clip of Iran supporting Israel and not its aggressive neighbors. I'm going for the first time next month. Got any tips of where to find good, cheap food in Tel Aviv? Keep up the great work. I mean, just look it up. There are lots of places to get good, cheap food in Tel Aviv. Yafo, Jaffa is a great place. You can get some great hummus, some great falafel in Tel Aviv, particularly in Yafo, particularly in some of the older neighborhoods of Tel Aviv itself. But there's tons of places, so just look it up. I'm sure if you Google it or Yelp it or whatever, you can find good places. I don't have any off the top of my mind, but enjoy Israel. Have a great time. One of the great, great places to go visit. All right, everybody, that's it. We've done an hour and a half on intersectionality. I hope you get a sense of the insanity that is the world in which we live. I hope it didn't depress you so much as to... but the nice thing about my critique of intersectionality versus anybody else's, I actually have the antidote. By listening to me, you will learn how to turn the world around and make it much better. But to do that, we got to get more subscribers. We got to get more people. The only way to do that is for you to share the shows. Share. Any video you see that you like, share it. Even if you think your friends and family will hate it, share it anyway. Be brave. Have some courage. Because courage, it's going to require courage to change the world. And secondly, support the show financially, because the more you support the show financially, the more I can do. And if anybody out there really does want to support an event with me and Douglas Murray on his new book, it'll cost between $5,000 to $10,000. Please let me know. Yaron, the email is Yaron at YaronBrookShow.com. And in terms of supporting, you can do so at YaronBrookShow.com/support. YaronBrookShow.com/support. And Yaron at YaronBrookShow.com if you want to email me anything. All right, guys. Bye. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I'll be doing a show tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking to Adjudicate about altruism, about Christianity, and about Western civilization. I think you're really going to enjoy the show. We're going to take some of the issues that I discussed with Ben Shapiro when I was on the Ben Shapiro show, and we're going to elaborate, because that show went by fast, and we covered a lot. And we're going to go deeper into many of the topics raised with Ben Shapiro, and I can't think of a person better to go deeper with than Adjudicate. So that'll be tomorrow at 3 o'clock. See you all then, I hope. Bye, everybody.